Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thank you very much for joining us. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, we are going to now focus at least the next couple of segments on what is likely to happen and what is happening right now in the great state of New Hampshire. And we head there now, and we are joined by John Nichols, who is a veteran reporter, and he is with The Nation, and he joins us from Keene, New Hampshire. John, nice to have you back with us on Beyond the Beltway.
Bruce, it's a great pleasure to be with you, and you sound every bit the same as you always have.
Well, listen, I was saying to Mike Miller, because he reads you regularly, who's one of our guests this evening, and he's a conservative and he's a Republican, but he reads you regularly, and I was just saying that, I was thinking as I was coming over here today, I think we go back to about 1992, so we've known each other for a long, long time.
We have, and you know who I ran into in Iowa at the start of the week at a Bernie.
Who? Who was that?
Frank Luntz.
Oh, Frank Luntz. Okay. Well, let me ask you.
Yep. We all met up. I think we all kind of traveled. We all were talking to each other.
We
about
traveled
30 years ago, if you can believe it.
Yeah, we traveled in the same circles, and let's bring it up to date right now. You're in Keene, New Hampshire. We should mention, for those that don't know The Nation, it's one of the leading progressive periodicals in the United States, has been around for a long, long time. And you hail from Madison, Wisconsin, so you've covered and you've seen the evolution of progressive politics in America. Where are you now? And in the race between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, let's focus on just those two in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. How do you see things shaking out just between those two? Hello?
Well understand.
John, are you there?
Here, can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, keep talking. Go ahead.
I apologize, brother. We're on the edge of a rally. I'm trying to hopefully make it work as well as we can.
Okay.
It's always dangerous to make a prediction the weekend before an election. But if we believe the polls, and frankly, the anecdotal evidence, what I'm seeing on the ground seems to parallel them. I think that Bernie Sanders is holding his base and potentially expanding it a bit here in New Hampshire. I was just at a rally with him tonight on a campus in Keene, New Hampshire, in the southwestern part of the state, and he had a pretty incredible crowd of a lot of students from the campus, but farmers and a lot of working class people from out in this region of the state. It was a good crowd. It's the kind of crowd you'd want for an election. Now, he's having rallies like that all over the state. Warren is also working the state very hard. She clearly is getting crowds out. She's doing well, but I don't think it's at the same level. And my sense is that what's likely to happen here is, a hard fight for first place between Sanders and Buttigieg. And then Warren in a much tougher position. Certainly working to come in ahead of Biden. I think she's got a good chance of that because Biden's looking very weak. But probably not too close to that upper tier. And also with a fascinating thing happen. I am hearing a lot as I go around the state, a lot of enthusiasm for Amy Klobuchar, and quite a few people who have been saying to me, well, I was going to vote for Elizabeth Warren, but I was really, really impressed with Amy Klobuchar in the debate on Friday night.
Yeah.
And so I think I think she faces a real challenge here.
I thought that Amy Klobuchar, and again, many of the analysts sort of agreed with this, is that I thought it was her best debate, and I thought it was a debate where she was a clear winner, and there weren't necessarily clear winners in previous debates.
I agree with you. And see, the interesting thing is that people have different demands on them in the debates. This is an important thing to understand. Sanders' supporters are going to be enthusiastic about Sanders, and also another portion of people are going to be enthusiastic because he delivers the same message, a core economic message, that there was the best night of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And some a little bit for different reasons, but for Yang and a couple of things. So it's really a question of modulation. How do they do? Mm-hmm. And in this critical moment for Amy Klobuchar. The moment where she had to do the best she possibly could. She basically turned the volume up to 11. I mean, she I think, nailed it. And the
other thing, John, that I want to ask is that, throughout this campaign, they've been talking about the various lane, the moderate lane, the socialist, the democratic lane. The one thing they've not talked about in the past, and that is the woman's lane. And it seems to me that what we have, or at least the voters of New Hampshire have tomorrow, is they have an opportunity to define who is the leader in the women's lane. And, that battle between Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren may be one of the most interesting and maybe foretelling results to look for on Tuesday night.
I agree with you. And I think
Hello?
Going into this sort of pundit trap of thinking that somebody who leaves, say, a Pete Buttigieg could only vote for an Amy Klobuchar, or somebody who leaves Biden could only vote for Buttigieg. That people are sort of in these narrow territories.
Right.
And that's never what I hear on the trail. It's never that way.
Mm-hmm.
I hear people say, I really want a woman president. I'm really excited. I was excited about Kamala Harris. It didn't work out there. Now I'm for Elizabeth Warren. And for good reason. We've had 45 presidents. It's about time we had a woman. And so that's what I hear people making moves that the pundits don't talk about much. And I think that's an error. I will tell you one thing. If Joe Biden really goes weak, do you know who that helps in my view? Bernie Sanders. Because I think Sanders gets quite a few of those union working class people who like Biden.
Mm-hmm. I said earlier in the program, I asked the question to Elizabeth or Alexandra Eidenberg, who was here, who was sort of undecided. I asked the question whether or not the Democratic Party would actually nominate a gay man over the first woman possible president of the United States. And she was sort of, she was impressed with the question, but what's your answer to that question, John?
I think the Democratic Party could nominate a gay man or a woman. I think the party's more than ready to do that. But I don't think at the end of the day that this year they're likely to do it for that reason, right? Because of its great symbolic and practical importance. My sense is that this time the party will nominate a candidate who makes the most credible case for these primaries and caucuses that they can beat Donald Trump. And it's an interesting thing.
John, excuse me. We're going to pause now. We have a commercial break. My guests in studio have a question for you, but I'm going to ask our producer Andrew Marshall to call you back and see if we can get a better line for the next segment, because we've had a real rough time in this segment. We're talking to John Nichols. Hopefully you've heard at least a portion of what he had to say. We're going to look for a better line when we continue from Chicago and Keene, New Hampshire, tonight on Beyond the Beltway. Bruce DuMont back. We're waiting for John to call us back on a better line. So when he does, we will bring him into the conversation. But Alexandra, you wanted to make a point.
So, we were just talking about the women, voting for a woman. One of the things we hadn't talked about yet was voting for someone who's a Jew, and I happen to be a Jew, and it's something I'm very proud of. And I've seen a lot of members of my organization say we're not ready for a Jew right now, and I'm shocked by that because I feel like we so are. How is that even a conversation? And earlier you mentioned folks back in the day not being ready for a Roman Catholic, and so I just wanted to
60 years ago.
Right. Thank you for affirming my exact point. I'd love to hear from all of you. Everyone brings their brilliance to the table. Do you think that America is ready for a Jewish person?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
No question. I don't think there's any hesitation.
Joe Lieberman.
Oh yeah,
People
no,
on
I think
my side, we love Joe
for,
Lieberman.
for a Jewish person, for
Was
sure,
elected.
no issue. I think certainly for an African American now, clearly no issue. I think for a woman, no issue. It's an open question about a gay candidate. I think, really.
Michael, you're
one thing
Jewish. I want to have you answer the question, and
Yeah, I think it's kind of a non-issue. And one of the things I will say, going back to Kennedy, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, my parents made a big deal of the fact that wow, America elected a Roman Catholic, and we aren't even Roman Catholics. They were like, this was a really huge moment for us, and I was thinking, why is that a big deal? Of course, a Roman Catholic. But for me, when we elected an African American, I was like, wow, this is a really big deal. And now my kids are going to think, I can't believe you thought that this was a big deal. So it shows you the progression of our country.
I'm going to give an answer that, again, more people may throw things at the TV. I think it would be difficult to elect a Jewish president.
A Jewish
A lot
woman.
of people do. I mean, this is what
I do.
it's
I'm going to
Why do you
admit
say that? Why do you say that?
Because I do believe that anti-Semitism is something that exists. It's deep in the body politic. I'm looking at the states that need to be won, and I'm looking at also the importance of having a huge black turnout. And black-Jewish relations are not perfect. They're a long way from perfect in a lot of parts of the country. And for all of those reasons, I'm giving you my.
I think we're going to
interesting what
find
you
out.
said
I think
Honest
we're going to
and-
find out.
Well,
Black-Jew
we will find
relations. I
that
feel
out,
That's
but I'm
almost
just
like a
saying.
closer relationship than many of them.
But again, we also have a situation where,
City.
say that one. I mean, the other thing is this: what about if this race comes down to between Michael Bloomberg
That's it.
and Bernie Sanders, both New York Jews,
And if you
for the
throw in
Democratic nomination?
I mean, I think the three finalists are going to be Bernie and Bloomberg and Buttigieg, the killer bees, two Jews and a gay person. And you know what? I actually think America is ready for any of them.
Okay, let's go back to John Nichols. John, are you still there?
I am here, and I just heard your conversation, and I will tell you that a Jewish candidate can be elected president of the United States.
Okay.
As much
Well,
as
I
love
hope
you,
so.
Bruce. And I will tell you that Pennsylvania, Jewish U.S. Senator.
Yes.
Michigan, Jewish U.S. Senator.
Yes.
Wisconsin, 2 Jewish U.S. Senators. Minnesota, Jewish U.S. Senator. The fact of the matter is that the upper Midwest, the states that you need to win, have elected a lot of Jewish U.S. senators and members of Congress. So
Governor.
my gut instinct is that this is quite doable, as is, I think all of these possibilities are there. The conundrum is, and this is the real conundrum, I happen to believe, and I hear so much of the pundit class reject this notion, but I happen to believe in tickets. I think it really matters who the president and vice president are.
Yes.
I do think it mattered to Barack Obama that he put Joe Biden on that ticket. I do think it mattered to, Ronald Reagan that he put George H.W. Bush on his ticket. Building the right ticket is critical politically. And so when we talk about a Biden or a Buttigieg or a Bloomberg or a Sanders, I'm less concerned about whether one of them could get elected president in the right circumstance than I am about the question of who will be put on that ticket to build it out, right? To get over some of the other challenges politically and structurally in this country, and that to me is the really interesting situation here.
Will the
because
Bernie
I
Sanders,
suspect-
John, if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, will his supporters, will they accept anyone less liberal than, let's say, Elizabeth Warren as a possible running mate? In other words, can they live with an Amy Klobuchar as a running mate?
Yes. As somebody who's really talked to a lot of Bernie backers in a lot of settings, and he's just with a couple thousand of them right now,
Right.
I can tell you that for better and for worse, it cuts both ways. But their loyalty is to Bernie Sanders. They're very, very passionate about him as a candidate. And so if he was to say, look, we can win this place, but I need fill in the blank as my running mate, I think you would, you always have the 1 or 2% that are going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. The fact of the matter is, I don't think Sanders would have any problem at all. The challenge for Sanders is that he really does. He believes, and having interviewed him many, many times, I think he believes very, very strongly in both building out a winning politics, but also having somebody he can work with. And so as you look at potential running mates, and we're getting into the zone where such conversations might be held. Certainly not there yet by any means. But I think that Warren is a possibility, and it shouldn't be underestimated. I think Klobuchar is a possibility. What I can tell you is,
John, let me just interject
Bernie,
for just a second. Nick Kalm is here, and he wants to follow up on something that you've just said.
Yeah, John, just a follow-up question on the whole Bernie question that Bruce was just asking. Bernie declared himself the winner in Iowa. We know that. Short time ago, before we went on the air, the party there has now finally declared Mayor Pete the winner, not Bernie. Certainly a lot of Bernie supporters, as you well know, feel the nomination was stolen from him last time in 2016 and given to Hillary. What's going to happen if it's perceived to be happening with his supporters, if that's perceived to be happening again?
Well, Iowa is such a disaster, right? Such a nightmarish mess of a thing that I do think it kind of goes into its own category here. You will certainly have people who you have every theory and every challenge and every objection, but I think that'll mainly exist on Twitter. At the end of the day, New Hampshire becomes the test, and as somebody said today, New Hampshire's where this begins now. Iowa ends up as sort of a fiasco unto itself. If Sanders wins comfortably in New Hampshire, and I'm not saying for sure that'll happen, I think Iowa kind of goes away. It becomes quickly forgotten. On the other hand, and I think the core of your good question is if there is a perceived sense of bias on the part of party leadership throughout the process, if there is an effort to bring back superdelegates, if there's a sense that the debate rules are being gamed in ways that are unfavorable, if it adds up to something, then you got a problem. Then the Democrats have a problem. And the interesting thing is I did see Tom Perez interviewed this morning, and I've talked to him about this a few times. My sense is he's very conscious of this, and I do really believe he's going to work very hard to avoid that impression. With that said, also, by the way, I can tell you that 99 9/10 of Americans have no idea what a delegate equivalent is, but they all understand that if you get more votes, you usually are supposed to win.
Here's
So
Michael Lieber. Michael Lieber is here. He supports Pete Buttigieg for president, but he's not here officially. Go ahead.
Hey, John, this is Mike. I am volunteering for the campaign. I'm actually going to be heading to New Hampshire Tuesday morning to knock on doors and hopefully attend a victory party in Manhattan.
You might.
Manchester on Tuesday night. Question for you in terms of the independent voters who can vote in New Hampshire. Do you get a sense of how they're going to break? Are they going to break for somebody who's a progressive like Bernie? Are they going to break for somebody who is perceived to be a little more moderate like Pete or Amy or Joe? Have you gotten a sense of that from talking to people?
Yeah, that's a superb question and a really important one. Here's the subtlety of New Hampshire. I've covered elections here going back a very, very long time. An independent in some parts of New Hampshire is different than an independent in other parts. And so if you identify as an independent in some of the Boston suburb areas that are right along the border, you are probably like a pretty genuine independent, right? You might, kind of vote one way or the other, go back and forth. If you're in the southwestern part of the state where I am right now, there's a lot of independents who are to the left of the Democratic Party. And so if they come in there, it's a bit of a compromise because they're not voting for, a Green or other lefty. So around the state, it's different. My sense is that Mayor Pete has done very well with getting through to a lot of those independents who are in the southeastern part of the state along the border. I think that he'll get some votes there. Sanders will continue to get on the western part of the state a lot of that. The interesting thing in play again, and I'm by Tuesday night, I could be way wrong. The independents tend to be the group that kind of surprises you by moving in and shaking things up. And if they do, I'm going to predict they will probably do it for Klobuchar.
Interesting
I'm
point.
not sure of that, but it's a possibility. I think.
John, can you stick with us for a little bit longer, or do you have to go back to your rally?
No, my rally is done. That's why we can hear each other so well.
Okay, very good. We're going to put you on hold.
I'm delighted to stay with you.
We're going to continue with John Nichols of the Nation. He joins us from Keene, New Hampshire, along with our guests here in Chicago. We'll continue 1-800-723-8289. If you have a question you'd like to pose, give us a call. 1-800-723-8289 from coast to coast and border to border and now around the world at beyondthebeltway.com. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago, and Mike Lieber, you have a question for John Nichols. So, Mike, go ahead and ask your question.
John, give us the sense of the enthusiasm on the ground, crowd sizes for the various candidates that you've been going to their rallies, and also at those rallies, which are the candidates who are actually kind of rousing up their the people there?
Superb question, and it's actually the right question for this state versus Iowa. There's no question that there is a much higher level of energy here, a much higher level of enthusiasm than there was in Iowa. It is different. More people are coming out. Now, this state, I have to be honest with you, this state has a high level of political tourists, and that needs to be understood. There are a lot of people, when you start asking people in a room where they're from, you have to be very careful to make sure they're from New Hampshire, because you get a lot of folks from Massachusetts and Vermont and other places coming in. But with that proviso, I can tell you that it's different. I felt in Iowa, in some cases, a lack of energy. It wasn't always true. Sanders always has high energy. There's no question of that. And his crowds are very young and very enthusiastic. And Sanders tends to have a major rock band with him a lot. And, he had Tim Robbins, the actor, tonight, who was very poetic and good. So his events are more like a festival. But I'm seeing big crowds for Pete Buttigieg. I mean, there is no question that there are a lot of people coming out to hear him and see him and to weigh that choice. Amy Klobuchar's crowds have really grown substantially. There's no question of that. Warren's crowds are good and solid. Biden still gets a good crowd here. Biden's benefiting here a lot by a key union endorsement, and that is the firefighters. They really are getting people out for him, and that's consequential. But overall, I would say there's a lot of enthusiasm. Where there is the incredibly passionate energy, I'm going to put that mostly with, again, Sanders and Buttigieg. I think the Buttigieg people are really into this thing and excited about it because it's a classic New Hampshire thing, right? Remember, this is the state that rocketed Gary Hart up in 1984.
Right.
It's the state that embraced Paul Tsongas. And remember, Bill Clinton lost this state to Paul Tsongas. And so I think Buttigieg has a little of that energy.
Now, speaking of energy and crowds, John, are you going to be in covering the president's visit to New Hampshire tomorrow night?
I'm going to give it a little shot. It's a complexity. It's a complexity because this is my choice, right? Everybody's got a good rally tomorrow night.
Okay.
Bernie Sanders has the rock band The Strokes at a huge arena, and probably the biggest rally that New Hampshire's seen in a political race in a long time. He's also got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez flying in. That looks like a pretty rockin' event. And then you've got...
How about Donny Osmond? Is Donny Osmond going to be with the president?
I'm not anticipating it. The weird thing about the president, I saw his rally in Iowa, and the interesting thing about the president is there are other people who come, but the president has an incredibly different way of using people at his rally. They don't few people may speak before him, but generally they don't speak before him. They're just there on the side waiting for the possibility that he will call them up.
Yes. Or
It's
recognize
a
him.
fascinating thing. No,
John,
it's
I'm-
tricky. No,
John,
he brings them in and actually lets them give a speech.
John, I mentioned in the introduction that you hail from Madison, Wisconsin. So clearly, everyone knows, certainly who listens to this program, that Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania are going to be the states that once again will likely determine who is the next president of the United States. Can you give us an assessment of where this campaign is in your home state of Wisconsin, where I'm told the Trump supporters are pretty well organized?
They are well organized. And the interesting thing is that Donald Trump benefits in Wisconsin from something that came before him. In most states, he really is sort of taking over the Republican Party organization, maybe building some things out, and some of his people building things out. It's different in Wisconsin. Wisconsin had the Wisconsin Uprising of 2011, that great battle between Scott Walker and the unions. And in the aftermath of that, the recall election and the 2014 election, a lot of conservative groups really put a lot of money into the state to build infrastructure, and they kept that infrastructure in place. It has largely transferred pretty well to Trump. And so in Wisconsin, he has not just, whatever appeal he has, but also a grassroots infrastructure that's been nurtured and invested in over time. What that means is that even though Wisconsin, generally in presidential, the truth of the matter is if things are going on pattern, Wisconsin errs just a tiny bit toward the Democrat. That's the pattern. Wisconsin went pretty Democratic in 2018. That's also true. If Democrats nominate a candidate who's got sort of the right mix of populism and personal appeal, they should be in pretty good shape. But they will never, at least in my view, they're never going to get it outside of like the 52-48 range, one way or the other. My gut is that Trump has he's probably got the 47-48. It's just a question of if he can get it over the line. And similarly, the Democrats probably have a 47-48 as well. It means that Wisconsin really is that classic battleground state.
John, when we get to March 1st, obviously February is going to be in everybody's rearview mirror, and then March 1st is we're a couple of days away from Super Tuesday, when Mike Bloomberg may actually come out and shake hands with people and not just run an air assault against the president. And my question to you is, how worried are the Bernie Sanders folks? How worried are they about Mike Bloomberg, or should Mayor Pete be far more worried than Bernie Sanders?
That is a terrific question. It's got many layers and many nuances to it. But the simplest answer is that the Bernie Sanders people have been running against the billionaire class now for the better part of 5 years. They kind of relish the idea of taking on a billionaire. I'm not sure they're ready for it. It's going to be a daunting task, because I think that Bloomberg's got an appeal that a lot of people don't, a lot of folks don't really recognize, but you hear it at the grassroots, and that is there's a ton of progressives, a ton of mainstream Democrats, even more moderate Democrats, who are just exhausted from opposing Trump, and Bloomberg comes in and says, hey, I got it from here on. I got the money. I can build the blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure he's right. I don't happen to like that type of politics, but it's going to have an appeal. And so the fight, the Sanders people, I think, are prepared to have that fight and to argue that you're not going to get the structural change you want. For Buttigieg, it's a more complex thing, because he then, let's say he survives and he makes it through. And so it's Sanders, Buttigieg, and Bloomberg. Let's say it is, in fact, that contest. In that case, Buttigieg has to emphasize his youth. I mean, it's what distinguishes him, and it may work for him, but he also runs the risk of getting, as would Klobuchar, Biden, others, of just getting kind of shoved to the side, pushed out by this massive Bloomberg
steamroll
machine. Yeah,
right. Mike Lieber's got a comment.
Hey, John, a question, because assuming that it does come to pass that after the first 4 states, you've got essentially Bernie and Buttigieg, and then Bloomberg is going to step in Super Tuesday. It seems like Bloomberg's whole theory of the case and why he first got in when Biden was starting to waver a little bit was, hey, I am the backstop in case I'm the centrist backstop in case Biden fails. And if you've got another centrist candidate like Pete, does that pretty much blow a hole in Bloomberg's whole theory of the case?
I don't think so. And here's the deal. I don't think that you'd be surprised how many people don't see Pete Buttigieg as a centrist, right? They may see him as a practical candidate, a candidate who's making some appeals that
Nobody at this table
that
does.
are different. What?
I say none of our
Yeah.
Republicans at the table think that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and you see, I hear that even from progressives. Pete Buttigieg has some liberal backers, and so the bottom line is, I think we've got to break out a little bit from that calculus. And what I can tell you is this: here in New Hampshire, yesterday I was going to drive out to the western part of the state, which I think is always a good place to get a feel of it, and so I was at some events. I got in the car. It's the first time I really wasn't talking to somebody else. Turned the radio on. First ad I heard in New Hampshire was a Bloomberg ad. He's not campaigning in New Hampshire. He's not advertising here, but they get Boston radio here. And he's all over Boston radio and Boston TV because of Super Tuesday, or because of March and thereon. Mm-hmm. And so the fact of the matter is, Bloomberg is already and will become increasingly omnipresent. And he is, in my opinion, going to run a campaign that seeks to be all things to all people. Now, passionate progressives are going to see through that and object to that. Maybe some passionate moderates, of which there are, may see through that and object to it. But the truth of the matter is, to fight Bloomberg, it's going to take a deeper, more nuanced message. It is. You're going to have to look for your where's the beef. And I'm not sure any of these folks have it yet.
John, we've got about 15 seconds for this answer, and we thank you for joining us today.
Yep.
But here's my question. I heard you earlier, you don't want to make a prediction. You suggested that Bernie, the mo might be with Bernie, but it also could be Buttigieg. But I want to make sure I heard you clearly that if there's a surprise headline, it's going to be Amy Klobuchar.
I'm going to bet on that. I wrote about her for tomorrow, so I hope I didn't waste my digits.
Okay, well, we heard you loud and clear on Beyond the Beltway. We thank you very much. Again, right before the primary here in Illinois, if you're going to be in Chicago, we'd love to have you back on Beyond the Beltway. I'm Bruce DuMont, back shortly from Chicago.
You being the Democrat.
Don't listen
Bruce
to
DuMont back in Chicago. We've gone through, we've only got 10 minutes left. We haven't even talked about the State of the Union address.
Wow.
Nick Com, that was a four-bagger for you?
the State of the Union.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a very impressive performance, I would
You
say.
think there was enough reality TV in there?
Oh, absolutely. With all the returning war hero and the kid who was going to their charter school. No, he hit all of the right notes. No, I know, Alexander, you'd like to rip up the speech just like Nancy did. Here's the question. Here's the question that everybody needs to answer. At the end of the State of the Union, if you watched the entire thing, from walking in until Pelosi ripped up the speech, who do you think attracted independent voters? That's what this is all about.
Yes.
Who do you think attracted any independent voters?
But the question also is,
was it the Democrats sitting there all in white, scowling and refusing to stand, and Nancy ripping up the speech? Or was it Trump reaching out to African Americans, sounding like a reasonable guy, being on the teleprompter? It's a serious question.
First of
Alexander-
all, full
Alexandra.
support of Nancy ripping up the speech. Loved every moment of it. I
Good.
will
Don't
admit
tell
Because
me
you're a
about
strong
Now-
partisan Democrat. That's
But
not who I'm
here-
asking
but
about.
here-
Let's go.
Literally,
Don't tell me about
everything that
civility
came out of
anymore,
Trump's mouth to me was nearly all lies, and it was so uncomfortable
Unemployment is low?
that I
That's a lie?
often had to walk away for a moment. That's how uncomfortable I was.
You're
with it.
entitled to your
mean,
own
all those
opinions,
data
not
about
your
the
own
economy
facts,
are
though.
lies?
I was not impressed, and no one I know was impressed. And
You're
I
not
do
answering my
play in
question.
Lane.
You're not answering my question. No.
The question about moderates. I think that when you
Independence.
do
Independence.
independence
Who
after the
who's
fact checking,
behaving?
Let her
if
finish.
they were
Let her
following,
finish.
they knew after the fact checking that was that the things he was saying was not true.
No, because the fact checking was all
economy's a
in
Mike Lieber.
It was an exaggeration.
Mike Lieber.
It doesn't move the needle at all. People's feelings about Trump are baked in. People's feelings about Trump are baked in. The ratings were low. It doesn't move the needle.
Even for African Americans?
Yeah,
It's like
African Americans can't stand Trump. Period. You know,
He's racist.
Yeah,
African Americans don't
African Americans generally
like Trump.
don't. African Americans
not
generally
racist.
don't like people who are either racist to them
not racist.
or say terrible things about them or enact policies that harm them. So
It was in
How
New
about,
York
how about the
City.
second
Agreed.
chance? How about the Second Chance Act? Did they like that, Alexandra?
Yes, they did.
the Second Chance Act. I mean, first of all, I feel the fact that we'd even say that the black vote is going to go towards Trump is absolutely ridiculous. To
I
me.
didn't
I
say
feel-
All
the
you need is
black
3 or
vote.
4
He doesn't need the
points.
black vote. He needs a portion of the black vote. And my question to you is, as the president who passed and signed, and his son-in-law led the legislative battle for the Second Chance Act, which was referenced in the Super Bowl ad as well. He spent $10 million to get a message out. Are you saying that no black folks are going to be
that
affected
commercial
by that?
was disgusting, and it was
Why?
upsetting. and
Why?
I find that this one
it was
second
effective.
chance,
because it was effective.
that this the one time that someone got a second chance, and it's my understanding that Kim Kardashian had a lot to do with that particular second chance.
So?
I
So?
find the commercial
Is a
to be
woman
offensive.
politically active? Are you opposed to Kim Kardashian?
I wouldn't call Kim Kardashian politically
Woman?
active.
Oh.
I would say that she's politically sensitive and very effective if
know
she
that-
helped get the Second Chance Act passed.
If you're a fan of Kim Kardashian,
I am
that's
not.
great.
But
However,
I want to be objective
I find
here,
that
Alexandra.
commercial
Kardashians
to
every
be
week.
to be completely offensive. I think that it was obviously perfectly placed in programming where we knew that there was a large block of African Americans
time.
watching it, and the commercial gave an example of one person getting a second chance, trying to pretend like he was giving more people second chances.
Well, he
It-
did
is,
give
he
more
is.
people.
That was the
he
point of
did,
the legislation.
Alexandra, do you not know that he gave other people a second chance, and they weren't all African Americans? Are you
I
you
do not
denying
think
the
that that's a
appeal?
platform appropriate for him to be touting when he is
Are you-
blatantly racist.
Are
He's not
you
racist.
are
He's
you
very racist.
He's
are
not
you
racist.
And he's also
Alexandra?
perpetuating anti-Semitism.
Do you
in
know
our
when
communities.
when he was in New York City, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Jesse Jackson for his support of the black community? Do you realize that happened? Did he all of a sudden
doesn't
become
care.
a racist
care.
on the
She
day
doesn't
he
like him.
became president?
So Mike,
This is
didn't like those
nonsense.
facts.
Mike, are you a big fan of Jesse Jackson?
A young Jesse Jackson, not the most recent Jesse Jackson. But he gave. So now you're attacking Jesse Jackson.
No, I'm just asking
What kind
because
of a-
it seems.
What kind of response is
it,
that?
it seems like
So Jesse
you'll use
Jackson-
Jesse Jackson for
Jesse
one
Jackson gives
purpose.
him this lifetime award for supporting the black community. And somehow, between that and all of a sudden,
And when
nobody
when
ever
did-
talked
when
about
did
this
he-
guy in
when
the
did-
press being
when
a
did-
racist.
when did
he
he-
became a racist.
When did
Okay.
he give him that award?
About 2010, 20.
I wanna-
If that's the case, how come Donald Trump got what 4% of the black vote?
I
in
want to
2016?
I want to come,
Six?
folks. I want to come back to the question. The question was, and I'm going to ask you, Alexandra,
so simply.
just a moment.
Everybody's a
Al-
racist.
Mike, Alexandra,
Oh my gosh.
do you not acknowledge that the Second Chance Act affects an awful lot of ex-offenders, many of whom are African American?
I think that giving folks a second chance is a good thing, and I feel as though he ostracized the situation. And like
In
you
what
said,
way?
the Second Chance Act helped folks of all different colors, all different races, all different walks. And in this case, what they showed there was an opportunity to ostracize, trying to make it seem like he was helping black folks. And I disagree. He is not helping black people.
You do not think he's helping black people?
I do not. I do
by
not think
letting,
our president
by letting
is creating a
people
culture
out of prison
of
who have been
acceptance and helping
improperly.
the community.
You're not acknowledging my question. Are you acknowledging that you're acknowledging and basically stating that African Americans who've been released under the Second Chance Act, they're not important?
Blacks
Are they-
know that this is the guy who said there are good people on both sides of
He
that
was
racist
talking
march.
about the
This
statue.
is the guy.
Don't repeat
Black
that lie.
folks know
Oh my
what is in this
gosh.
guy's heart.
They don't care. They don't care about the facts.
You had to push that in, didn't you? I mean, just you were
I
just
like
waiting.
pushing. I like pushing in the truth. I believe
It's
in
not
the truth.
the truth. It's a lie.
Go to the videotape.
Fact.
It's a lie.
Go to the videotape.
If you go to the
Both
videotape, you'll find out that
people on both sides.
that's not what he said. He was talking about people that supported the Confederate flag on state property.
That's exactly
including the
right.
people with the hoods and the tiki torches.
Oh,
People in there as well, but that's not what he was talking about. But again, that's the message for the Democrats. Certainly, we've heard tonight.
now
that,
you know why I
there's
can't
going to be
possibly
no-
vote for a Democrat.
There's going to. You've said it again. We've made you more of a Republican tonight,
know.
Mike.
This is a
Another
guy
vote
who
for
didn't
Trump.
Vote for Trump
Bruce,
the
I'd like
first
to bring
time.
up
Bruce
one-
Dumont, we've
There's
got
gonna
to
be a lot
say
of me.
goodnight to Alexandra Eidenberg and to Michael Lieber, our Democrats, to our Republicans, Mike Miller, and to Nick Kalm. Our thanks to Hector Pacheco and Andrew Marshall and Fritz Goldman. I'm Bruce Dumont. Good night from Chicago.